I'm working on right now is what's becoming a life work, if you will. It's a history of sexuality post World War II in the United States. So moving us way forward into the modern period, or postmodern, however folks want to talk about it. And so it also, like Lily's case, came out of my first book, which was on the Women's Army Corps during World War II, and looking at gender and sexuality and women in relation to military service. And my interest, I'm trained as a historian of women, but I shouldn't say but, I should say and my interest has I'm very interested in sexuality studies and history of sexuality. And so, because I think that sexuality becomes a way, if you look in the United States historically, and certainly in the 20th century, which is my period, and I'm always embarrassed to say that when I'm sitting next to somebody who's talking about hundreds and thousands of years. I have this century that I really focus on. But that sexuality becomes a language, it becomes a way that people work out different kinds of anxieties, different kinds of cultural issues, moments of debate, contestation, whether it's turn of the century, turn of the 19th to the 20th century, and concern about modernity and what that means, and is the modern world going to be terribly different than the world we've come from? A lot of the discussions are around things like venereal disease and or homosexuality, same-sex sexualities, and female masculinities. I mean, there's all kinds of ways, and not just that, but eugenics, emerges in the 20th century as a means of clarifying and speaking to concerns with hierarchies, conventional hierarchies being threatened. And so sexuality for me is a way into that, not just conversations and debates, but really significant shifts and changes through the American 20th century. And so this work is, as you can imagine, quite huge. And one of the key issues for me is that if you look at a lot of works that, whether we're talking about women's history or gender history in terms of the U.S. context, and histories of sexuality and things like that, one of the things that they often lack, is they always start with a group, and then and this is again a fault in my first book as well. I just couldn't figure out a way around it. Talking about, okay, white women did this, and white middle class women did this, and then here's African American women, and here's a few Latinas, I'm most interested, and so I'm sort of talking all around your question, but I'm most interested in how we can talk to and speak about sexuality post-World War II period, and not start with the dominant system. Start from a period that's, not a period, a group or a position that is outside that dominant system. And what that does in terms of allowing us to see what the sort of normative structures are, and then also and offer a different view is what I'm looking for. And I'm not sure if that's going to be something fabulous or if it's going to be something people are like, oh yeah, well of course, no problem. But I'm even with my own research, I'm finding that looking from a non-dominant perspective is changing the way I see and think about what is the broader sexual system, right? So that's kind of, generally speaking, what I'm trying to do here. And on the most basic level, I'm asking a series of very, very simple questions. What do we know about sex? How do we know it? What do other people think they know about us in terms of sexuality? How do they think they know that? What are the markers that they're looking at that are in allowing them to make those conclusions? And what are the consequences of these knowledges, right? And as part of that, also thinking about and talking about what is who are the authorities? What are the disciplinary? I'll just say, who are the disciplinary authorities? I mean, is it parents with children? Is it teachers with students? Is it a federal government coming in? Is it local ordinances like that police attire, in the post-World War II period. You have to be wearing at least, you can't be wearing even undergarments of the opposite sex in some locales, and this was a way of policing both gay men as well as lesbians in the post-World War II period. So I'm giving those little tiny examples as just a way that this sort of works to take a look at a sort of culture that is in some ways sort of in crisis, not so much in crisis, but trying to return to normalcy after a fairly major cataclysmic event, a world war, a fairly lengthy world war, and then what does that mean in terms of how that culture, sort of what it does in the post-World War II period? What are some of the changes?